as do not be angry or do not become angry. The translation of this hadith is actually practiced a little bit differently. Because ghadab, anger, is something that Allah Azza wa Jal has actually made natural within the heart of a human being. Anger is a natural emotion, such as happiness or grief or anxiety or fear. These are all natural emotions that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given the heart of a human being. So the Prophet ﷺ is not saying, La taghdab, as in, never get angry. Because are there not moments in life where anger is necessary? Of course there is, right? For example, the ulama, they say that you should become angry at things that are haram. If there is any form of dhulm, any form of oppression, then you should become angry within the heart. You should feel uneasy within the heart. There should be a level of emotion. For example, if someone comes and says something that is rude or abusive or harmful or harassing of a person that you love or care for, like your children or your mother or your father or your spouse. So what does la taghdab mean? La taghdab means do not allow yourself to be controlled by the impulse of anger. Do not allow yourself to act out of the impulse of anger. And this is where we get the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he says, "Laysa ash-shadidu bis-sura'ati, innama shadidu alladhi yamliku nafsahu 'inda al-ghadab." He says that a person is not truly powerful or strong if they're able to wrestle someone to the ground. Rather, the person who's truly strong is a person who's able to control, he says, yamliku nafsahu. Yamliku nafsahu. The word yamlik comes from the word mulk, which means to have authority over something. Nafsahu, their soul, inda al-ghadabi, in a moment of anger. That's the meaning of this hadith, is that whenever you feel an impulse of anger, because not all anger is good. A lot of anger is bad. Just like not all happiness is good. Right? This idea, by the way, how many people in here, raise your hands, have ever heard of the word jahala? Jahil, right? A lot of people, they think about this and they say jahiliya. The word jahiliya, colloquially now we use the word jahiliya to refer to the pre-Islamic Arabia, right? Before the Nabuwah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The word jahala doesn't mean just ignorance. It doesn't mean just ignorance. It means when a person fails to control their emotions. And this is why the historians, they call the pre-Islamic times of Arabia the time of Jahiliyyah, because people used to act upon impulse. They weren't able to control their emotions. When they felt angry, they would automatically come to a duel. When they felt happy, they would do something foolish out of their happiness. When they were, sad, they would let their grief overtake them. So what Islam came to do was not to eradicate the emotion. Islam and Sharia came to control it. It came to tame it. Because the nafs is an animal if it's not controlled properly. So the ulama, they give a couple of tips and remedies, because the idea of ghadab, extreme anger, is actually what you would call imradul qalb. It's of a disease of the hearts. So just like a disease physically, there are also spiritual diseases. And just as a doctor would give you physical symptoms of a disease, for example, if a person goes up to a physician and they say, well, I think I have the flu. What will the physician, or any good physician, what will they ask the patient? What are your symptoms? Runny nose, fever, cough, headaches, whatever, right? Body chills, whatever it says. The spiritual ailments also have symptoms. And so the disease of ghadab also has symptoms. And so the ulama, they say that these are some of the symptoms and some of the solutions. Number one, the first solution to ghadab is seeking refuge in Allah physically. And this is where you get the hadith of Prophet ﷺ where he says, إِنِّي لِأَعْلَمُ كَلِمَةً لَوْ قَالَهَا لَذَهَبَ الْغَضَبُهُ أَعُوذُ بِاللَّهِ مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ الرَّجِيمِ. He says that I know a statement that if you were to say it, it would repel anger, and that statement is أَعُوذُ بِاللَّهِ مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ الرَّجِيمِ. Now, everybody in this musalla will say, well, yeah, of course. Right? Like, everyone knows that. Everyone knows that if you mention Bismillah or the name of Allah and you say A'udhu Billah, I seek the help of Allah, of course your anger would be, dissipated. It would be thwarted. But here's the catch. How many people in the state of anger have the heart to say it? In a moment of anger, have the heart to say it. So he says physically mentioning the name of Allah is one of the greatest medicines for the disease of ghadab. And then the scholars, they say the second is remaining silent. وَإِذَا غَضِبَ أَحَدُكُمْ فَلْيَسْكُتْ. If any of you gets angry, be quiet. Remain quiet. Because this is a human experience. I don't have to speak on this. There is 100% a moment in your life and in my life where in a fit of anger, we said something that we wished we could redact. And this is why, by the way, there's a shara'an ruling. Obviously, it's not practiced in terms of as much affluency today because we don't have that system anymore. But in terms of sharia, there was actually a ruling in fiqh where a qadi who is to pass a judgment in a legal circumstance will not be allowed to pass a judgment while they're in a state of ghadab. If the qadi is in a state of anger, the actual other rulers or the actual other judges will actually tell him, you're excused from this case. Because one cannot make that decision while in a state of anger. Okay? So he says, فَلْيَسْكُتْ. And then finally, number 3 out of 4, it says that the Prophet ﷺ would say, anger, إِنَّ الْغَضَبَ مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ وَإِنَّ الشَّيْطَانَ خُلِقَ مِن نَارٍ. He says, ghadab is from shaitan. It's from the devil. And he says, وَالشَّيْطَانُ خُلِقَ مِنَ النَّارِ. And shaitan is made from fire. So he says, وَإِنَّمَا تُطْفَأُ النَّارُ بِالْمَاءِ. And the way that you put out fire is with water. So if you would like to put out your anger, go make wudu. Beautiful, subhanAllah, the rational reasoning, the logical mind of the Prophet ﷺ. Think about it. They tell you, like, they do this in cartoons, right? Like, whenever someone's on fire, they're angry. What do they get? A bucket of water, they throw it on him. And the Prophet ﷺ says, if you feel angry, be quiet, leave the circumstance, and go make your wudu. And then the last tip that the ulama, and we'll end with this, inshallah, is this. He says, قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم, إِذَا غَضِبَ أَحَدُكُمْ وَهُوَ قَائِمٌ فَلْيُجْلِسْ. If any of you is angry and you're standing, then sit down. Okay? And then he says, فَإِنْ ذَهَبَ عَنْهُ الْغَضَبُ وَإِلَّا فَلْيَضْطَجِعْ. He says, and if the anger leaves him, well and good. And if he should persist in his anger, then you should lay down. What is the meaning of that beautiful advice? Change your position. Change your position. If you're in a moment where you're angry, change the circumstance. And subhanAllah, look at the hadith, it's so beautiful. The hadith doesn't say change the situation of other people. What is it saying? Change your hal. Change your hal. Change your situation. Because whenever somebody gets angry, what's the number one complaint? Well, they're making me angry. They're saying something that bothers me. They're the ones that made me say that. The Prophet says, don't worry about what they're doing. You change your own hal. You change your own circumstance. If you're standing, sit. If you're sitting, then lie down. And in our day and age, the best advice that I can give myself and other people is, if you're in a situation, walk away from it. Save yourself. Man samata naja. The one who is silent is the one who's saved. Don't allow yourself to slip in a moment where Allah is challenging your nafs. Get away from that situation. So the hadith of la taghdab, la taghdab, la taghdab, it's not a ruling of don't become angry because anger is natural. What it is a command from Allah of is don't allow your nafs to be controlled by your anger. You have to be able to control it before it becomes in control of you. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us of those who are able to control our nafs and our anger. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow our hearts to be of purity and of sanity. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us from all of the diseases of the heart. Ameen Rabbil Alameen. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik wa nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilaik. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.